I shared and I put myself off mute.
You did. Ooh, I like that. You shared it, my friend. That is amazing. But it's an episode that we should be sharing because today, man, where I feel like we've closed something. I love, like, for everybody who's watching out there, the way that I kind of think of podcasts and think of, like, if you have like videos and all that stuff, it should be a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. I like to kind of treat it like a TV show. For anybody who watched earlier on this year when we did the empowerment of women to logistics, that's what we did. So even with this book club Friday, like, we've come to the end. This is so cool, man. Like, how do you feel? Let's kind of go back to, like, when we decided to kind of go with something like this and switch it up from Fun Day Fridays, because Fun Day Fridays was pretty fun. I thought it was, we had some good ones, we had some not so okay ones, but for us
See,
to
I
go
think
through this
every Fun Day Friday was awesome. The
oh,
guests just didn't like the questions, and so.
there we
But
go.
it's switching it up, brother. Is I always believe that if it's not broke, break it and make it better. For me, that's kind of what I try to live by. And to do a book club like this, for starters, um, got me reading the book again.
Yeah.
Right. Intention to read it, had the intention to read it, had the intention to read it, and never got to it because I pretty much get almost 3 books a month that get sent to me, or I go and buy, or I hear about and want. And I stopped reading a book a week, probably about 4 months ago, because I found I was just reading them to read as opposed to reading them to retain. And it was
Yeah.
two big things, right? So the whole process and the formula of a chapter a week and talking about it, to me, Ryan, the talking about it and actually like going through the chapter and writing the notes and kind of saying, okay, how do I think about this? And not only how I think about it, how would I apply it? And then on the Friday saying, okay, well, how did you apply it? Like that to me has put tasks in place where it's changed the meaning of the way I digest the book, not the meaning, but the way I digest it. And I think it's a remarkable thing to do. And I'm excited to keep going with other books, because if it's going to happen with this one, and then you kind of stack the ideas on top of each other, and now you've got, it's the way books should be used, because there's a lot of shelf help out there where somebody buys a book and that book literally has every single piece. And I know it sounds so Pollyanna and cliche, but it's every piece that can truly change your life and really change the lives of people that you talk to, right? Like, how many people do you know in life that have said one or two things to you and it's been like, whoa, yeah, that changes your life and it changes their life, right? And to me, it doesn't need to be these astronomical changes. It's like, I'm using the power of now every single second of every single day. Like, even to this day, when we started weeks ago with this book, I still sit in the shower and I feel every single drop hit my shoulders. And you know what, Ryan? It gives me goosebumps every single day, because I really don't think we do it enough. And I don't know. I mean, for me, the way that this has all been put together and the way we go through it, the books mean a lot more now than they've ever have before.
Couldn't agree more. I think before we even got into this, I've always been a fan of, I don't like reading a book a week. I think that, to me, and this is just me, my own personal opinion, for me, it's just a waste of time, in terms of, you can write as much notes, you can do all these things, and I feel like you don't get to retain it. So when we're reading this chapter once a week, then I get to read, even if it's 20 pages, I get to go and read it every single day, or I get to, like, read it and then listen to the audiobook. So then I can, like, hear different things. And I think that's the way it is. I'm going to stick with I've got like 5 to 7 books that I just want to rotate through, instead of like trying new things. I know we'll try our books here for Book Club Fridays. I'm going to talk about that towards the end. But I can confidently say that Power of Now has entered that, like, echelon of, like, the books, the Ryan's choices, I guess, we'll call it, of the 5 to 7 books that I will continuously go through it, because one thing I kind of saw from Alex Ramosi is just like you can read all these books, but it doesn't matter. Like, you'll get more value and more volume and more input and outputs from reading a book 3 times than reading a brand new book every single week and things like that. And
If
this
you look at Bob,
specifically,
right, he read Think and Grow Rich
mhm,
from the time he was like 17 until he died close to his 90s. Like that was his book. His
yeah.
entire business, his entire life, his fortune that he amassed was all built off of that one book.
See, so we're all going to take it from
But
different
that was
things. And
his quote unquote Bible.
yeah, see, so and like for people out there, and just like what you just said earlier about when somebody says something like that, right? Says something to you, and you're like, oh my god, that's profound. Like for me, like we've talked about this off air. There's gonna be certain people that we gravitate to, and we really like, and we'll kind of take their word as gospel if we want to use the word the Bible as well. So I think Eckhart Tolle. I think for me personally, in my own personal journey, A New Earth. I think that's one of his next books. Is it called? I
That
think
is his,
it's
yeah, it's his
yeah, A
second
New
book.
Earth. Yeah. So that's going to be the next book that I kind of go into myself to kind of continue this thing. And I don't know, like I think like this book club thing, I think for everybody out there, I'd like to talk about what we kind of learned from a book club itself, not from the reading the book. And then we'll get into specific, maybe 2 or 3 things that we took away from the book. But for myself, for everybody's out there, this just reminded me of like collaboration, whether it be like elementary school, high school again, like remember in kindergarten, we all had to read the same books and English class specifically. Right, I remember we read what the Chrysalids, a couple Gary Paulson books, and there's those certain books that you remember reading, and you're going through that as a team, as a group, rather than saying. And I think it brings up 2 things. It brings up accountability because you have to read it, like like you can't really, even though there's ChatGPT, you really can't go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, summarize chapter this for me, because you're not going to bring anything to the conversation. So I think what now it brings that collaboration in terms of, okay, I got to actually read the chapter. I've got to take something away. There's so many times throughout this 10-week process, Dan, that you and I've read that we have obviously read the same chapter, but we've taken different things. I remember
Yeah.
you kind of like talk about addiction and things like that. For me, I was like, well, I'm going to skip over that because that doesn't mean anything to me. And then those parts that that I skipped over and that you really liked, and just having that conversation of like, we just read the same 20 pages. So I think for anybody out there, whether you have like a circle of friends, and even if like you have a significant other, do it together. Like pick a book and like be like, okay, let's go if you're gonna grab dinner or coffee every week, like every couple kind of does, like let's talk about it. You at least you have a subject, right? You don't have to like talk about your week and things like that. But I think like I love the word that you said, shelf help. I think that is such an amazing phrase. And I think with everybody here, this book specifically, this is the first book, Dan, that I've read that's not salesy. That's not a sales book. I don't want to say salesy, but I kind of tend to lead to read. I think Atomic Habits was the one before that. But yeah, this book, spectacular. I'm excited to continue on with these kind of books because it's actually helped me with my sales too. And I want everybody, this is a sales podcast, and I want people to take that away, that if you really it's relationships at the end of the day. So if you want to become a really good salesperson, study stuff like this, study human psychology. You don't need to, like you were talking about, Think and Grow Rich. A lot of books that I'm reading these days, Dan, is that they're quoting somebody else.
Yep.
So they'll quote that book, they'll quote like Dale Carnegie, they'll quote those things. So it's just like, okay, well, you and I have said this on the show many times, that the message is exactly the same from the beginning. They're just putting it in new ways or getting a new audience of how to go from there. So Dan, what is like your impact on like the 10 weeks of like the book club specifically? Have you done something like this or collaboration like that? And
Yeah, so I started a book club when I was doing sales training in the company I was at, and we had 14 people in the book club, and it was one of the best experiences. And it was actually a friend of mine, David, who suggested a book club. And actually, we should have David on because he runs a company that is pretty much built off of honoring people and what they do, called Built to Lead. And David introduced me to the book club idea. Gosh, 2011. And the soonest I was able to, I started a book club at the company I worked for. And the salespeople that stuck with the book club, there was a direct relation in how fast they grew.
Mhm.
And even today, they're super successful. I think book clubs are probably one of the most underrated ways to engage your team, to engage yourself, to grow a department, to create camaraderie, to create that connection and that atmosphere, that culture in a company. Not and again, when we were talking about this book club, when we were talking about like 2 chapters a week, I think so. The first week, I think we did chapter 1 and 2, and then
Right.
realized, you know what, like that's a lot. We'll go down to a chapter a week. As long as the person implementing the book club isn't like, okay, read this book in 2 weeks, and then we're gonna like it's an ongoing conversation. And for me, the biggest thing, and you already said it, was like how similar but different
Mhm.
we see things in each chapter. And it's interesting because going through the power of now, it's like in the now you realize, like you just said, the addiction thing was big for me but wasn't big for you.
Mhm.
But yet you caught something, and when you said it, I was like, oh my god, yeah, that's like when you were saying it on air, I was like, I didn't highlight that, but man, that's like a killer point. That's like a powerful point. And then I go back and reread it, because my mind was on a different level. I then see your point, and I'm like, how did I miss that 35 minutes ago? You know what I mean? And so for book clubs, I really, really do think that if you want to engage a team, if you want to engage, your friends, your family, um, get in a book club or join ours. And we'd love to have you on every Friday and talk about it. I mean, when Stacy came on that day, it was great to have a third person on. I'd have 3, 4 people talking about it. You know what I mean? And just getting that frame and perspective from their end. Because I think in the end, Ryan, you would learn a lot more when you read it and talk about it and
Mm.
talk through the conversation in your head. Right? We're all
But
having these little conversations in our heads all day long. And how we talk through that conversation matters,
mm,
and how you implement this, and hey, how did you implement that tactic in the book? And how did you implement that? And here's the thing for all you salespeople out there, Ryan hit a big spot when he said, it's not just sales books. Like it's mindset books, it's business books, it's psychology books, like all of these, every single book like that, what can give you really good insights in your sales. Hell, a newspaper can give you good insights. How can it? Pay attention to the headlines. Pay attention to how they loop you in on the article. Like these are things you can use in your email every day. And I think it's again, I'll say it again. It's an overlooked part of the overall growth process as a person.
I love that you said that, and what you just said too about reading a book with somebody and having that like person to talk to. Like there's so many times like we'll all like either read something and be like, I want somebody to talk to about this, and sometimes we get discouraged because then we have to give that context, right? It was just like,
Yes.
instead of kind of going like, imagine if you can go into a conversation like, hey, I just read chapter 3, which I know you did. What did you think of A, B, C, and D?
Yes.
And go right into it rather than, hey, I'm reading this book. This is what this book is about. Here's where I'm at, and this is exactly where it says. And then you kind of build that story as well. So I think it's just spectacular to have that community and have that sense
Yeah.
of belonging to, which I thought was amazing.
Because
Like I
when you
said,
frame it for somebody,
yeah,
it turns it in your perspective, that
ex-
frame, right? Because
yeah.
we can't help it.
We can't. It's just like I always kind of do. It's like whenever we see a meme or something like that or a video and we think it's like so funny, but then we show somebody and then we're waiting for them to laugh, but sometimes it never comes and we're like,
Yeah.
oh crap, So it's just like when you have that, when you're, let's say both of you have already seen that video and then you come together and have that conversation. It's just like what I remember when I was in the office, Dan, like every Monday morning, that water cooler talk was the best. Like,
Mhm.
hey, did you catch especially after the Super Bowl, hey, did you catch the Super Bowl show and just different events? And this was live events, right? So if we can like go into like a book itself or like an article. So even this, for everybody who's watching out there, it doesn't have to be a full-fledged book. Send an article, to your customers, send a article to your teammates and things like that and be like, hey, these are the top 2 things that I got from it. What do you think? It's very
Mhm.
small. And then you could start really small, a couple articles and be like, hey, let's start a book club. Christmas is coming up and I know a lot of us are going to be giving gifts. Like what if you were to get the same book for everybody, in your team, for your customers, prospects, all that stuff, and be like, hey, we're starting a book club, fresh on January 2nd or 3rd, and this is what we want to do, right? And I think
Yeah.
I just encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah, I like that you said send your send customers or prospects an article, sub chapters in a book, photocopy the 2 or 3 pages, send it to them, highlight it. What do you think? Let them read it. Like these are all conversation pieces that I'm willing to bet none to very few in your industry are doing. Like I think you would totally stand out if you did something like that.
Yeah, it just goes back to the story of what's that guy? Our good friend at Crosstalk. What's his name?
True.
Drew. Drew, there we go. Drew was kind of telling me once that, him and he's big into F1 racing, and him and his customers, like they play every Wednesday or Thursday night. And, you want to talk about relationship, forget the sales portion of it, like you want to go from that. But like something like this could be like something to build rapport with, and have
Yeah.
a talking point when you're going to have your meetings with and things like that. For me,
Yeah.
like what I've always kind of said, this is dogs. I hopped on a meeting with a brand new prospect, and the person came down to Toronto from Vancouver, and she was talking, I couldn't find a dog park. What do you think we talked about for the next 15 minutes? So just find those things from there. But Dan, for me, like I said, going through this is the finale of the book club. There's 3 things that I really took away from this book. Like I said, mentioned it throughout the weeks. It was really like the ego and understanding like that dysfunctional state of consciousness. It's like a collective mental emotional pattern that consists of thought and emotion. So understanding both of those. The second one was really silencing the mind when he talks about quieting the chatter, the sales chatter in the mind that we normally kind of get. And some people will always kind of say like, listen to your gut or listen to your mind, but how much of that is like chatter that we just kind of keep on going. So for that, I've kind of bumped up my meditation a little bit, understanding the things around me. And the last thing was understanding time. And I think I got a founder appreciation of time itself because I looked at, we get 168 hours a week, so I started looking at my life as like 168 poker chips. And then I was like, okay, well, 8 hours times 7, those are the poker chips that are going to be sleep. Some of these are going to be for my dog, so it's going to be things like that. And looking at a circle of life is something that I've been looking at as well, which is like your career, your finances, everything that basically like consists of your entire life, and figuring out what poker chips am I going to put into there. So I thought those 3 were just spectacular. And you know what's cool, Dan? You could attest to this because you've read this book already. It's just that when I go through this book again, I'm probably gonna have 3 different things that stick out to
You
me in
will.
that moment. Yeah.
You will,
So
100%. And it's because of the way you consumed it.
yeah.
So you've already raised your level of awareness on the consumption of this book, just by the consumption of it. You might have consumed it before, which you raise your level of awareness. The way you went through it this time, digesting it instead of reading it. And for me, that's the biggest thing is how do we digest a book, digest the information, apply the information, as I always say. And if you were to start from chapter 1 right now, it would be a different book. I guarantee it, because you already have had 10 weeks to change that process and the parts that you're like, okay, I got to focus on these. You've already started focusing on them. And you're going to raise that level of awareness. And I think it's super cool. Like if you were going to read a book a month, call it, just hypothetically,
Yeah.
you choose 6 books and you read it every 6 months, each book. Right. So you just
Cycle,
revolve
baby.
through
Cycle,
one,
yeah.
through one, through one, and you keep reading. And then, for all of you out there that are like, yeah, that's something I want to try, make sure to use different color highlighters every time. So like what I do is at the beginning of the book, I open up the front cover. And if it's a book, I say to myself, I'm going to read this 4 times. So I highlight 4 different colors and I write the date that I started, the date that I finished beside it. And then when I go to read it again, I write the date I start. When I finish the book, I write the date I finish, and I use the same color highlighter. And it is one of the trippiest things you are ever going to experience.
Yeah.
Because initially, your eyes go to the highlight. And you're like, okay, I learned that. And then it's funny because so 2 things happen. One, when you read the highlight, you ask yourself some pretty hard questions. And sometimes you don't like the answers. Like, oh, that was very powerful last time. Have I? Shit, I haven't done anything to fix that. Okay. So, and like you feel bad because you highlighted it, you put stars or asterisks beside it, and you're like, oh my God, I got to do this. I even put like sticky notes in my books, right? Where I write my thoughts out and then put a sticky note in, and I'll go through them. And it's like, okay, I didn't implement that. And then you read another line, and it's like, how did I not see that? So it's like twofold of these aha moments to take your lives vertical. And that for me is the beauty of paper books.
Mm,
I haven't found that much impact in like digital books yet,
mhm.
or audiobooks, because audiobooks you have to go from one to the other to see where you bookmark. Like you're to flip
Yeah,
back
I
and forth,
think
right?
I learned a hack with like with audiobooks, Dan, that I learned it last week and it's actually been helping a lot. It has to do with podcasts as well. I think audiobooks and podcasts, you just play them just to have background noise, and I feel like your whatever your being or whatever your consciousness is gonna pick up on the things that it picks up on. I feel like with audiobooks, because like I've tried the audiobooks and podcasts when I'm walking my dogs and things like that, and I'm like, I really don't want to do this. You know, I really don't want to be paying attention to each word. I want to be able to like, okay, well, if I was looking at a page, maybe I want to pick up one sentence or maybe one
Mhm.
word or something like that. So I feel like that. And you're so right about the paper stuff because this was the first time I started. I have a Kobo, which is an e-reader for everybody
Yeah.
out there. And I decided this time to actually, well, this is my wife's book. So I was like, I'm going to read the paper book. I'm not a big highlighter, and for everybody, you find your own thing, but I was just like, just the feel of the paper again, you know, and understanding and even using a bookmark, you know, like going out and getting a bookmark again. I thought it
I
was like so
love it.
vital. But yeah, coming back to what you kind of said with audiobooks, I just really think you just play it, you know, as background noise. So if you're sitting down working in office, maybe you got a headphone in, or you know, you got one of those speakers. I won't say the names. G O G was it G G
Yeah, just
G
so you don't
O?
wake anything up in the
Yeah, you don't
background.
wake up
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
And from
It's
there,
funny that and all the dog stuff you have to spell, right?
exactly, you gotta smell. Well, hey man, we're becoming better spellers that way, right?
Yes, we
So,
are. Yes, we are.
but I think with that, so but just coming back to your point, you know, I think you know, for everybody out there, you know, if it's audiobooks, just remember, like, you don't have to like listen to word by word. You know, even for me, Dan, I've tried listening to audiobooks when I was at the gym, and then it made me distracted on the audiobook that I forgot, oh, what set am I on? Or what like for sets specifically.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh, I'm on my second or third set. So for now, it's just honestly just music and let it play, and whatever it hits my conscious, it hits my conscious.
I like that approach. I stopped a while ago listening to podcasts or any kind of audio when I'm taking the DOGSs for WALK. And the reason being is I wanted to hear the sounds around me. I just wanted to kind of be one with nature. And for me, um, I love audiobooks for one reason. So typically, any book I buy on paperback, I buy the audio for a couple different reasons. So one, years ago, and I recently heard Alex Hermosi talk about it again. He says, "You really want to digest something, read it while you're listening to it."
Yeah, yeah,
And that for me, I'd heard maybe 10 years ago, and it's so powerful. But for me also, sometimes I just sit here with a pad, I put both earphones in, and I put an audiobook on, but I put it on at 1.25 speed.
hmm,
And this is the trick. If you are listening to audiobooks and you're finding your brain drifting, um, put it on 1.5 or 1.25 speed, depending on. Now, Eckert told me I put it on 1.5 because he's very mellow and he
yeah,
talks super slow. So I put it on 1.5 instead of 1.25. But when you do that, you actually wake your brain up to pay attention, because it's as if somebody's going talking and then they go, you know what I'm saying, Ryan? Like, I can't believe what you're saying. Like, and you're like, what the hell? Just like it's
yeah,
you're not used to a voice being that fast unless you're at an auction.
yeah,
So those two things. And sometimes I just sit here with a pad and paper and I write and I highlight and I pause and I write and I play and I write. And that's my kind of hour instead of reading a book. If I'm kind of in that mood where I might be a little like tired, I guess, where you kind of feel your eyes and you're like, yeah, I don't know if reading would be a good idea right now. And again, it goes back to what you said, because your brain just goes somewhere else, even if you're reading. Like, you ever
yeah.
done that where you're reading a book and all of a sudden you read like 3 paragraphs? You're like, what did I just read?
Yeah. Oh, well,
You got to
I feel
start
like that's
over.
why like fiction books are so great as well because like fiction books are for your imagination, right? And low key, like I've been thinking about getting like a back into like a little bit of fiction too because like we read so much nonfiction. It's just like we need our minds to wander, right? And I love that you said that, Dan, because like yeah, there's sometimes I'm like, hold up a second here. I gotta really, especially when you have distractions around you too, and I think that is so important.
Yeah. And let's face it, almost everything is a distraction,
Yeah.
right? Like, you think about it, you have 3 dogs, I have 2 dogs. One of them gets up and wants to go to the door. It's like, okay, stop what you're doing. And with every distraction, I've found there's a good 5 to 7 minutes before you settle back in.
Yeah.
So, you think about it, you have 10 distractions a day. That's 57 minutes. That's almost an hour of like reconnecting with the intention, reconnecting with what you were doing. This is why I love the early hours so much, because I find there's or the late nights so much because I find there's no distractions. Like editing a video, for example, like from like 10 till midnight is some of the most productive time because there's no distractions. The dogs are sleeping. The house is quiet, and even to the point where, you're doing something and then there's a bang and you're like, everybody okay? Everybody, and you get up to go see, and now you sit back down. And again, it's a good 5 to 7 minutes to get back in that
Into the mode.
the
Yeah.
swing, and it's the reason I block things out for 45 minutes at a time. Give myself 5 minute walk, like 5 minute walk around, and a 10 minutes to get back into the next task. Because then, you can set your intentions, you can do all that. And this isn't a productivity conversation, but you talk about the power of now. It's setting that intention and getting back into the now. Okay, what am I focusing on right now? What needs to happen right now? And I love it. I think, this book, I think Ryan was probably the best book we could have started with, brother. I have to tell you that.
Yeah, it's sounding a great foundation, and I think well, speaking of that, a great segue into what we got for everybody coming up. Dan, go into what we got going on, man.
So you're talking about the next book?
The next book, yeah.
Oh, so we're gonna do Positioning by Al Ries and Jack Trout. So this book, it's like wicked ways to cut through the clutter in any industry. It talks to you and reviews like Nike, Coca-Cola, how they position themselves. Like, I don't know about how you guys, but I've always wondered about the phenomenon that is Apple, right? Like, people sleep outside for an iPhone 15 when they've got an iPhone 14 and there's very few upgrades, right? Maybe there's a little bit of a bigger, better camera or something, but like the phenomenon that is that positioning, the phenomenon that is the positioning of logos. When people see your logo, they you don't need to see a Dorito bag to know what the Dorito logo is, right? Like, and here's the thing, even if you don't eat chips, you know what that is. Do you know what I mean? And so this book dives into that. And I thought it would be a really great book for all of you sales reps out there, especially in today's market, because there's a lot of smoke, there's a lot of clutter. And, taking this book and really following the process of being seen and heard in a crowded market. That's the reason I kind of thought, going into Christmas might be, because we'll do this for, I think there's like 8 chapters. So we'll probably be pretty much halfway through December by the time it finishes. No,
we'll be done.
October,
We should be done. Yeah, we should be done.
We'll be done. We'll be done just by December, kind of thing. So it was like, what a great time to kind of crank up that positioning factor, because we know the market's going to turn. And when it does, what's your position going to be with your prospects? What's your position going to be with your customers? And I'm thinking, Ryan, I really think it's going to be a fantastic book just to kind of open. And I can't wait for the conversations you and I have about positioning, brother. Not to mention, our books are going to relate directly to how we're growing with Bridger and kind of what we need in the market with Bridger, and relating it back to the market with our sales and logistics businesses. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a really good book at a really good time. Now that we understand the power of now, how to quiet our thinking, now we can really get into that like lasering focus, full on scope into what needs to happen next and how do you drive it right through.
Go. So cannot wait. So Dan, tell everybody who's it by again.
So
pop an Amazon link.
Al Ries and Jack Trout. Let me just grab it for everyone.
Okay, so just everybody can see. So we'll start that next Friday. For everybody who's watching out there.
So for everybody watching, it looks like this. Okay, it's called Marketing Classic: Positioning, the Battle for Your Mind, How to Be Seen and Heard in an Overcrowded Marketplace. Now, y'all know our industry is overcrowded. Every prospect will tell you, man, there's too many people calling me. So this will be the great book to get in there and do more. So I'm just going to look and see how many chapters here, right?
Yeah, do all your.
So there's like so yeah, I mean we might want to do um we might want to do 2 chapters a week because each chapter is like 6 pages, seven
Okay.
pages in
Okay. Yeah.
chapters. So we'll probably do 2 chapters a week because there's 25 chapters, which will maybe even 3 depending on kind of we'll play it by ear, I guess, for lack of a better term. But you can see I already got my little tabbies going, and you were talking about bookmarks. I already got my bookmark in there, right? You gotta love books. Gotta love books, brother. So that's the one coming up, everybody.
Awesome. So we want to thank everybody for being on this journey with us for Book Club Fridays. Like we said, we're gonna keep it going, especially for next week. And Dan's got all the stuffs there. So yeah, everybody have an amazing weekend. We'll be back at it on Monday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. What Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Dan, any final announcements? X. Yeah, I don't even use that stuff. Yeah, there we go.
There we
All right,
go,
brother.
man. No, we're good. Hey, listen, everybody, in the show notes here. Did you put it in the show notes, Ryan? I don't know if you did. In the show notes, if you're listening on the podcast, check out the 30-day special. We're giving you over $10,000 worth of free courses, templates, strategy, tools inside Bridger, just for saying maybe to try Bridger for 30 days for free. No credit card needed. Have it over at bridgersystem.com/30-day special. That's bridgersystem.com/30-day special. Get your over 10 G's worth of stuff just for saying maybe and trying the system out, y'all. Let us know what you think.